Elections have consequences. And because this country elected Donald Trump in 2016, we have the most extremist Supreme Court in modern history. Yesterday, the New York Times reported that Justice Samuel Alito didn't just fly an upside-down flag outside his Virginia home. He also proudly displayed a flag that has become a symbol of Christian nationalism outside his New Jersey summer home. The flag, seen here, is called the Appeal to Heaven flag, which, like the inverted U.S. flag, was carried by the rioting insurrectionists at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, some will claim it's a Revolutionary War flag, but that symbol fell out of favor and into obscurity. The flag has now been repurposed as a symbol of support for Trump. More importantly, it's a symbol of a religious sect in the Stop the Steal movement, which advocates for a modern America defined in purely Christian terms. And what I'm about to tell you next will not surprise you in the least. ProPublica has learned that Leonard Leo, the man who has single-handedly remade the judiciary in this country and played a key role in not just Alito's confirmation, but also the 5 other conservative justices, is flying that exact same flag outside his fancy summer home in Maine. It will also not surprise you that House Speaker Mike Johnson has the same flag outside one of his offices. Now, let me be clear. What these men are choosing to signal to the world is that they are fighting for a theocratic America, one that despises Earl Warren's mid-20th century Supreme Court, which made landmark rulings desegregating schools and other public facilities, recognizing a right to contraception for married couples and to interracial marriage, barring state-sanctioned school prayer, and guaranteeing access to public defenders for indigent criminal defendants. These men, who hold incredible power over more than 340 million Americans, are on a crusade against secular America. Now, after notching wins on rolling back access to reproductive care, expanding prayer in schools, and crippling the Voting Rights Act, they've delivered yet another blow to diversity and equity just this morning. And the justice who is flying a Christian nationalist flag outside both his homes was the author of the majority opinion in a case that gave a full-throated endorsement of political gerrymandering, even if it's racially motivated. Samuel Alito, in his opinion, stated that the purpose of the ruling was to prevent litigants from repackaging a partisan gerrymandering claim as a racial gerrymandering claim by exploiting the tight link between race and political preference. He then went on to assault the notion that racism might exist in America at all, writing in his typically indignant prose, when a federal court finds that race drove a legislature's districting decisions, it is declaring that the legislature engaged in offensive and demeaning conduct. We should not be quick to hurl such accusations at the political branches. Alito's sneering words, backed by all of the conservatives on the court, now codify the presumption of white racial innocence into the law. His words are truly delusional and breathtaking. But Justice Clarence Thomas, his concurrence takes the cake. Thomas, making the argument that America is not racist and doesn't need the courts to push a fair and just society, assaults the Warren Court's ruling in Brown versus the Board of Education, which found that racial segregation in public schools is unconstitutional. Thomas, whose craving for luxury is exceeded only by his clear self-loathing, faults the Warren Court for taking a, quote, boundless view of equitable remedies through extravagant uses of judicial power to end racial segregation in the 1950s and 60s. That's right. Clarence Thomas, who to America's endless shame succeeded the great Thurgood Marshall, is criticizing the Supreme Court for ruling that a racist system is unconstitutional. Let me just make it plain. The conservative majority does not believe that racism exists. And because they think it doesn't exist, they have now made it easier for Republicans to use redistricting to help white Republicans maximize their political power. Justice Elena Kagan, on behalf of Justices Sotomayor and Jackson, wrote this stinging rebuke in their dissent. Quote, "This court is not supposed to be so fearful of telling discriminators, including states, to stop discriminating. Those actors will often have an incentive to use race as a proxy to achieve partisan ends. Go right ahead, this court says to states today. And so this odious practice of sorting citizens built on racial generalizations and exploiting racial divisions will continue. Frankly, Justices Alito and Thomas do not care. Alito famously bemoaned the fact that you can't say that marriage is a union between one man and one woman, which is a lie. You can say that all you want. Hashtag First Amendment. And Thomas once reportedly told clerks that he intended to remain on the court until the year 2034 because, quote, the liberals made my life miserable for 43 years, and I'm going to make their lives miserable for 43 years. Folks, this is why elections matter, because it does not stop here. They are coming for the right to contraception. They are coming for the right to gay marriage. They are coming for it all. Every single 20th century advancement, except for interracial marriage, of course, because that one would affect Clarence and Ginny Thomas, is Martha Ann. Because make no mistake, this is a war on secular America that they intend to win. Joining me now is Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP, and David Jolly, former congressman and MSNBC political analyst. Derek Johnson, I'm going to allow you to respond first to what the court has done today.
Well, it's unfortunate, and you're correct. Elections does have consequences. Clarence Thomas is a grifter. He is benefiting for positions that he actually taking positions that he benefited from. But for affirmative action, we would not know Clarence Thomas. But for desegregating society, we would not know Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is an unfortunate outcome of a tradition of Black people grifting off their race to portray their race. And it's unfortunate. And what we've seen the Supreme Court do in the decision was to undermine the question of equal protection under the law, that no state should use race as a proxy to discriminate for political gain. We are living in America in 2024, not 1950s apartheid South Africa. And I believe this court want to create an apartheid system.
Yeah, I think they wish we were living in 1950s apartheid South Africa, including Clarence, who thinks somehow he might benefit from it so long as he's some rich man's pet. Let me go to you, David Jolly. Let's talk about Samuel Alito. His contempt for his position, his blaming of his wife, his 2 coup flags, and then he is the author of a ruling which says, go ahead and discriminate as long as you color it as political discrimination, because really he's fine with racial discrimination and gerrymandering.
Yeah, Joy, I guess we give credit to Samuel Alito that he allows his wife to make her own decisions about which flag to fly, if not her own reproductive freedom. But that's between the Alitos, I suppose. Look, this issue on the gerrymandering decision that was made and all voting rights decisions that are considered by this court is really fascinating to me because of how quickly the Thomases and Alito will jump to the argument that racism is over, that there is no racism in the United States anymore, and therefore the protections against discriminated classes no longer need to be there. Look, all you have to do is go to certain political rallies tonight and you will see racism on display. But set that part aside as well, and to suggest that the discriminate impact of a history of racism in the United States is still not affecting opportunities for communities of color across the country tonight requires a professed ignorance of the facts right in front of their eyes. I mean, perhaps they live in some pretty special neighborhoods where they don't see the disparity in economic inequality. They don't see the access to healthcare inequality, the access to education inequality, to transportation, to jobs. It is there. And that indiscriminate impact or discriminate impact is a result of centuries of racism in the United States, and there still is a role for the federal government. This court will not ever address it, and it's why, Joy, though I don't personally have a hard stance on this position, I think Democrats right now need to start talking more about expanding the court, run on the issue of expanding the court, because the only way to dilute the power of the Alitos and Thomases now for the next several decades is to say we're a party that will expand the court and expand your freedoms.
Indeed. And I will note that Democrat Steve Cohen of Tennessee has introduced a bill calling to censure Samuel Alito for his coup flags. But Derek Johnson, I think the thing people, I started this by saying elections matter, but I think people need to get their Democrats and just Americans in general, independents, Republicans who care about being a democracy, need to wrap their minds around the fact that if Donald Trump becomes president, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas will immediately retire. They're both in their 70s. They want to retire under a Republican. We now know they are naked partisans. They're not jurists by any stretch of the imagination. They will retire, and Donald Trump will replace them with 30-something and 40-something-year-old versions of themselves, meaning Donald Trump will have appointed at that point 5 out of 9 members of the United States Supreme Court. He will have created a court that will last for 50 years or more. That is the legacy he will then inherit as somebody who did not win the popular vote the first time, who got a stolen court seat that he was allowed to flip after Justice Ginsburg died. This is insanity that people are even considering doing it. How do we get average citizens, Derek, to understand that that is what is at stake?
Well, I was in Detroit on Sunday, and I talked to a group of formerly incarcerated young men, and they were talking about their frustration, and I listened to them. And after they finished, I said, listen, in a two-party system, there isn't a third-party candidate option that's throwing away your vote. In the game of chess, it's not about the one election in November. It's about the power your vote means long-term. And as a result, you have to move away from candidate A versus candidate B. This is about fascism or democracy. This is about your future. This is about the opportunity and the tone that you set in this power game. What we are looking at, unfortunately, is a small set of individuals that are highly funded by billionaires who are seeking to control tax policies, who get taxed, who's not, and what those tax dollars are spent on. And they're willing to risk our Constitution and this democracy to maintain their supremacy.